缅甸的民主化现在仍然处于现在进行式，究竟是可以开放到什么样的程度？其中的关键当然就是反对派领袖翁山书记，他到底能不能够成功的在2015年参选总统，目前还有待修宪才能够确定。回顾翁山书记过去为缅甸争取民主的漫漫长路，1988年 Miss Thida 曾经参与的88学运是非常重要的关键。现在首先带你来看去年88学运满25周年的相关报道。
8月8号，缅甸仰光会展中心挤满5000多位观众，讲台上大荧幕播放着25年前缅甸学运的血泪史。1988年8月8号是缅甸民主的重要里程碑。当时由知识分子、工人及僧侣发起的学运，遭军政府血腥镇压，造成至少3000人死亡，1000人被逮捕。3年前，缅甸结束军政府统治。2012年，首度开放民众举办纪念活动，今年参与人数达到高峰。当年学运领袖表示，缅甸民主之路总算站上起跑点。
တမိုင်းဆိုတာဖျောက်ဖျက်ပြလို့မရဘူးဆိုတော့ဒီနေ့နိုင်ငံရဲ့အခြေအနေတွေဟာ1988ဒီလူလူရေးတော်ပုံကြီးကနေပြီးတော့မွေးဖွားပေးလိုက်တဲ့အခြေအနေတွေကျွန်တော်တို့လိုချင်တဲ့ညှော်မှန်းတဲ့အခြေအနေကိုမရောက်သေးဘူးဆိုပေမဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ကလမ်းစာလေးတစ်ခုတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ရောက်လာ
翁山苏姬是88学运的主要人物，当年曾在仰光大金寺鼓吹50万群众以和平方式争取民主。事后，他遭军方软禁10几年，成为民主运动的标杆。如今重获自由，担任国内最大反对党全民盟主席。有人形容翁山苏姬已卸下民权斗士的光环，身为政治人物走进权力核心，他所面临的严峻考验才正要展开。雨点 TV 梁采凡编译。
我们今天访问的是缅甸的知名作家 Miss Thida。I'd like to ask you about your working with Miss Aung San Suu Kyi during 1990. You worked for NLD at that time. And what's your observation and your thinking on Miss Suu Kyi in this time in Burma? Would she become very capable leaders? Is there any difficulty of her become the president in the future?
I worked with her from 1988, late 88 till 89, just before she was under house arrest. So in these days, what we have a concern is the Constitution, 2008 Constitution. And some of the Constitution clause, it prohibits her to become the president.
Right.
And to have a constitutional amendment, it's a big challenge. To change some clause, it needs a lot of census from nearly 3/4 of the members of the parliaments, including including the military candidates.
Right.
So it's really, really hard. So before 2015, if we cannot solve the problems of the constitutional amendment, she has less hope for becoming the president.
But now that the current president, Thein Sein, and also the ruling party, they are all said they are favor for the constitutional change. So what kind of obstacle would that be in the future?
According to the clause 436, it's said it needs census from the 75% of the members of the parliament to change one clause,
right,
including the plus at least one vote from the military candidates. So it's really hard. You know, current parliaments, the nearly 90% of the members of parliament are ruling party. Indeed, it is a military party. So it's a very rare chance to have a census. So we don't know what the result will come out after this program. And there are some other groups of people, they claiming not to change the particular clause from the Constitution in order to have her chance for being a president. So it's so much complicated.
In one of your book, you mentioned that people have high expectation of Ms. Suu Kyi, and then you said that that would make her a prisoner of applause. What do you mean by that?
You know, I feel we need to be free and independent in the sense of not having peer pressure also. So for her, this kind of the expectation and the applause or the appreciation put her into a rigid iron mesh, not to decide as she wish or as she want to, something like that. Sometimes we need to be very independent. If we need to fulfill the people's expectation or hope, someone cannot be free, 100% free at all. So that's for that reason I say she's kind of the prisoners of applause. Everybody's just applauding her in order to fulfill their expectation, not in order to assist her to fulfill what it should be.
Well, you are meaning that she's literally living among those expectations and cannot be somehow, rather become, do you think she can become a leader of Myanmar, or is it only something that reflect on the expectation of the people? I mean, by leader, I mean sometimes it will go beyond the expectation. Sometimes it will tell people what they should do rather than follow what people expect her to do.
But indeed, she's already been leader, I think.
Right.
And then in that sense, sometimes people cannot agree what she is now doing. So in that sense, she already go beyond the people's expectation, but the expectation is still there. So I think the problem of Burma is people are still feeling powerless. They don't yet believe in their power. So they cannot be so much helpful for her to reach the democratic society. That's a problem.
Okay. So what if in 2015 that the constitutional cannot be changed and she cannot become the president? Would that be a big rupture in Burma democracy?
Well, indeed, the true democracy strength is not depending on the hands of the presidents, as I believe. It's the power is it's balanced among three pillars, not only the administrative body, but also the legislative and the judiciary bodies. So if people still understand what is the key players for the democratic society, people cannot be that much depressed if she cannot become the president. Of course, a lot of people wish she could become the president and then we can change so much of the society. But even if she cannot be, we'll still not need to be too depressed, because the power is in the democratic society, the power is not only in the hands of the president. So we can still pushing and doing ourselves to resist, not to lose our democratic rights.
Let me ask you about the role of current President Thein Sein. A lot of people give credit to him, saying that he really started the reform. Do you agree with that?
Even he himself, frankly, said that during his trip to Europe, and this is the planned reform.
Okay.
So the military government, from the very beginning, we have aimed to have democracy, but because of preparation, it took us 25 years. So something like that, he already been said. So it is a planned reform, and I don't think he's the pioneer for making this reform.
You think he's just the agent for the military to do the reform?
Sort of.
So in that case, what we are seeing in Burma these days is not something that is irreversible. It's still the process can reverse to a non-democratic way of, you think that way?
Yeah, we are still at the fork in the road. There will be so many ways. If it is not going backward, it can be static in this situation, or I don't know, because it's also the whole future is not only depend on the government nor NLD or opposition, but also depending on our own citizens, our own people. That's why if we want to go forward, all stakeholders, all people should do our own effort to move forward.
One last thing about the democratic transformation is that different countries deal with this issue differently. People sometimes held a trial for the former dictator. And some people, like South Africa, they propose truth and reconciliation. How to deal with the former dictator sometimes play a very major role in the transformation process. I mean, if you do them too harshly, they may not give up power. If you don't do anything about this, there's no justice exist. So how do you think Burma would deal with this issue?
Right now, it's hard to say, you know. A lot of people, they really don't know how to handle this. And without enough civic education, it will be very hard to practice the truth and reconciliation practice to reach the final resolution. That's why what we need is every single citizens' participation in solving our problems peacefully. Without their consent, without their commitment, we cannot go through this. So that's why I think we need to educate our own people how we can solve our own problem peacefully. Otherwise, we cannot solve it.
Okay, finally, I'd like to ask you, this is your first trip in Taiwan?
Yes, it is.
What's your impression so far? I understand you arrived here 3 or 4 days ago, and you are leaving in 2 days. What kind of places you have been, and then what kind of people you met? What's the general impression?
Oh, I love to be here, and I think Taiwanese people and Burmese people, we share some of the sufferings together, and we also share our value towards the freedom of expressions. And what I'm so much impressed is the Museum of Literature, and you did a lot of effort for making the physical evidence of your past and the role of literature and the journalism, you still value it. This is the very good thing, and I really envy, and I'm really being very impressed by this.
And is there any impression you have on the people you met? I mean, people are generally interested in what's happening in Burma?
People, yeah, I think they all, when we make a discussion and they all say, oh, that's what's happened here a couple of years ago. And then so that's why I think we can easily understand each other because we have been through the similar history, and you go ahead for having freedom of expressions already. So I learned a lot from your people.
Thank you, Ms. Thida, for sharing with us your experience and your thinking here in Taiwan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
我们等一下来，今天关心还有哪些其他的国际消息？